Hope's betrayal of Steffy before her shocking dismissal sent ripples through every corner of the fashion house and the Forrester family, marking one of the most emotionally charged turning points the company had seen in years, because what began as subtle tension between two women trying to coexist professionally soon unraveled into a deeply personal conflict fueled by jealousy, ambition, and unresolved history that neither of them ever truly escaped, and as Hope found herself increasingly pressured to prove her worth amid declining sales and mounting expectations, she made a choice that crossed an invisible line, a choice that Steffy never expected from someone who had once claimed to value honesty and family unity above all else. Yet the warning signs had been there long before the betrayal surfaced, lingering in tense meetings, passive remarks, and strategic decisions that quietly undermined Steffy's authority while maintaining an outward appearance of cooperation. And insiders began to notice that Hope's approach to leadership had shifted from collaborative to competitive, driven by a desperate need to secure her position in a company where legacy often mattered more than innovation, leading her to secretly challenge Steffy's creative direction behind closed doors while publicly supporting it, a duality that ultimately set the stage for the explosive revelation that would follow. Because when confidential design strategies were leaked to a rival partner just days before a critical launch, suspicion immediately spread through the executive offices, and although no one initially believed Hope could be responsible, subtle inconsistencies in timelines and access permissions pointed uncomfortably toward her involvement, forcing Steffy to confront the painful possibility that the person she had reluctantly begun to trust might have intentionally sabotaged her. And the emotional weight of that realization struck harder than any professional setback ever could, especially considering their shared commitment to preserving the company's reputation. Yet Hope convinced herself that her actions were justified, believing she had been repeatedly sidelined and overlooked despite her contributions, and in her mind exposing weaknesses in Steffy's strategy would demonstrate her own value rather than destroy trust. But betrayal rarely follows logic. And when Steffy finally uncovered proof linking Hope to the leak, the confrontation that followed became unforgettable, filled with years of unresolved resentment erupting into raw honesty as Steffy accused Hope not only of professional misconduct, but of exploiting family ties to escape accountability, while Hope defended herself with a mixture of regret and defiance, insisting she never intended for events to spiral so far out of control. Though her explanation only deepened the sense of betrayal because intent mattered little compared to the damage done, and the fallout quickly spread beyond their personal rivalry, reaching executives, designers, and family members forced to choose sides as rumors intensified. Investors grew nervous, and the company's carefully cultivated image of unity began to crack under scrutiny, prompting emergency meetings where leadership debated how to respond without igniting a public scandal. And it was during one of these tense discussions that the unthinkable decision emerged. Hope would be dismissed from her position, a move that shocked employees who had long viewed her as a central figure within the brand's identity. Yet for Steffy, the decision carried a complicated mix of relief and heartbreak, because removing Hope protected the company, but confirmed that their fragile attempt at reconciliation had ultimately failed. And when Hope was officially informed of her termination, the moment carried an eerie calmness rather than dramatic outrage, as if she had anticipated the consequences long before they arrived, though beneath her composed exterior lingered devastation at losing both her professional standing and the fragile sense of belonging she had fought so hard to maintain, and word of her firing spread rapidly, sparking emotional reactions throughout the office corridors where colleagues whispered about loyalty, ambition, and whether Hope had truly acted alone or simply became the scapegoat for deeper corporate tensions, while Steffy struggled privately with guilt, questioning whether stricter communication or earlier honesty might have prevented the betrayal from escalating. Yet every reflection brought her back to the same painful truth that trust once broken could not easily be restored, especially when business and family were inseparably intertwined. And as Hope packed her belongings, memories of past triumphs and collaborations flooded her mind, reminding her how quickly admiration could turn into isolation when confidence crossed into desperation, leaving her to confront the uncomfortable realization that her need for validation had overshadowed her principles. And despite the anger many directed toward her, some employees quietly sympathized, recognizing how relentless pressure within the company often pushed even well-intentioned individuals toward questionable decisions. But sympathy did not change the outcome, and as the elevator doors closed behind her, Hope understood that the life she had built inside those walls was over, at least for now, while Steffi faced the equally daunting task of restoring morale and rebuilding trust among a team shaken by internal conflict. Determined to prove that accountability mattered regardless of personal relationships, yet leadership came with loneliness as she absorbed criticism from those who believed the punishment was too harsh alongside praise from supporters who viewed her actions as necessary strength, illustrating the impossible balance she was forced to maintain. And in the weeks that followed, the company attempted to move forward with renewed focus, unveiling new designs meant to symbolize resilience and renewal. Though the absence of Hope's creative voice remained noticeable, a reminder that success often carries the cost of painful decisions, and outside the company, Hope began reevaluating her identity beyond the brand that had defined her for so long, wrestling with regret while also confronting lingering resentment towards Steffi, unsure whether forgiveness or rivalry would ultimately shape their future. Encounters and the emotional complexity of their story continued to captivate those around them because it reflected something deeply human: the struggle between ambition and loyalty. The consequences of Hope's betrayal did not fade quietly after her departure. Instead, they deepened in unexpected ways, creating a lingering tension that followed both women long after the dramatic firing reshaped the power structure at Forrester Creations. Because while the company attempted to present a polished image of stability to the public, behind-the-scenes emotions remained raw, conversations cautious, and alliances fragile, as employees adjusted to a workplace suddenly defined by caution rather than trust. And for Steffi, the responsibility of leadership felt heavier than ever, since every decision she made was now scrutinized through the lens of what had happened with Hope, forcing her to project confidence even when doubt crept into her thoughts late at night, wondering whether she had misjudged Hope's intentions or failed to recognize the warning signs early enough to prevent the collapse of their partnership. Yet she pushed those doubts aside during board meetings, where she emphasized transparency, determined to rebuild unity and ensure no one else felt driven towards secrecy or desperation. While across town, Hope struggled to adapt to a life without the company that had once defined her purpose, finding that the silence following her firing was louder than any confrontation. As calls from colleagues dwindled and industry contacts hesitated to associate themselves with someone surrounded by scandal, leaving her isolated with only her memories and the painful awareness that a single decision had rewritten her future. And although anger initially fueled her resolve to prove everyone wrong, reflection gradually softened that anger into introspection, leading her to acknowledge how fear of irrelevance had shaped her actions more than she ever wanted to admit, a realization that marked the beginning of personal growth even as professional opportunities remained uncertain. Because redemption in the fashion world rarely arrived quickly, especially when trust had been publicly shattered, yet Hope refused to disappear entirely, quietly exploring independent projects and reconnecting with creative instincts free from corporate pressure, discovering that innovation felt different when it came from passion rather than competition. And meanwhile, Steffi faced her own unexpected challenges as success brought new rivalries within the company, with certain executives questioning whether her decisive handling of Hope's firing reflected strength or ruthlessness, sparking whisper debates about leadership style and family favoritism that threatened to reopen wounds she believed had begun to heal, forcing her to balance firmness with empathy as she worked to maintain loyalty among employees still unsettled by recent events. And during this period, family gatherings became especially complicated, filled with polite conversation masking unresolved tension, as relatives avoided mentioning Hope directly while acknowledging her absence in subtle ways, creating emotional distance that lingered long after dinners ended. Yet beneath the surface, some family members quietly hoped reconciliation might someday occur, believing that shared history held too much meaning to end in permanent estrangement, and rumors soon emerged that Hope was preparing a professional comeback, igniting speculation throughout the fashion community about whether she would challenge Forrester Creations or seek collaboration elsewhere, a possibility that unsettled Steffi. Despite her outward composure, because competition from a former ally carried emotional weight far beyond ordinary business rivalry, reminding her that unresolved feelings could resurface at any moment. And when news finally broke that Hope had partnered with an emerging designer eager to capitalize on her notoriety, reactions were mixed, with some critics predicting failure while others viewed the move as proof of resilience, signaling that Hope's story was far from finished. And as she prepared for her first independent showcase, she confronted a mixture of fear and determination, aware that every review would judge not only her designs but her character, transforming the event into a test of redemption as much as artistic talent. While Steffy monitored developments cautiously, determined not to let personal history distract from her responsibilities, yet unable to ignore the emotional complexity of watching someone she once trusted rebuild from the ashes of betrayal. And the parallel journeys of both women highlighted how conflict often forces transformation, pushing individuals towards self-awareness they might never have achieved otherwise, because Steffy learned that leadership required compassion alongside authority, while Hope discovered that ambition without integrity ultimately undermined success. And when their paths finally crossed again at a major industry gala, the atmosphere thickened with anticipation as colleagues watched closely, expecting confrontation or lingering hostility. Yet the interaction that unfolded surprised everyone, marked not by anger but by cautious respect, as both women recognized the costs they had paid and the lessons earned through hardship, exchanging brief but meaningful words that hinted at healing without erasing the past. And although forgiveness remained incomplete, the moment demonstrated growth on both sides, suggesting that rivalry and reconciliation could coexist in complex ways. And the encounter sparked renewed discussion within the fashion world about second chances and the power of accountability, inspiring younger designers who saw in their story a reminder that mistakes do not necessarily define a lifetime, while internally each woman reflected on how far she had come since the betrayal that once seemed insurmountable, acknowledging that pain had shaped resilience rather than destruction. And as new seasons approached, both Hope and Steffy found themselves evolving beyond old identities, redefining success not solely through professional victories but through personal understanding, because the real transformation lay not in who won or lost, but in how they learned to confront vulnerability, ambition. As the months passed, the emotional aftershocks of Hope's betrayal continued to shape not only her own path, but the evolving identity of everyone connected to the drama, because while the immediate scandal had faded from headlines, its deeper consequences lingered quietly beneath everyday interactions, influencing decisions, relationships, and even the creative direction of the fashion world they inhabited. And Hope gradually began to experience something unexpected: freedom from comparison. Since for the first time she was no longer measured against Steffy, the Forrester legacy, or expectations rooted in family politics, allowing her creativity to emerge with a sincerity that surprised even herself. Yet freedom came paired with loneliness, as success without familiar support felt hollow, forcing her to confront the emotional cost of ambition pursued at the expense of trust. While her new collection slowly gained recognition for its authenticity, critics noting a vulnerability in her designs that reflected genuine self-reflection rather than calculated branding, and this growing praise began reshaping public perception, transforming Hope from a disgraced insider into a figure of resilience attempting redemption. Though whispers of her past never disappeared entirely, reminding her that rebuilding reputation required patience rather than triumph. And meanwhile, Steffy faced challenges she had not anticipated after consolidating leadership at Forrester Creations, discovering that victory carried burdens few outsiders understood, because maintaining authority meant constantly proving she deserved it, especially to skeptics who believed personal conflicts had influenced corporate decisions. And although the company stabilized financially, creative tension emerged among designers who struggled to fill the emotional and artistic space Hope once occupied, forcing Steffy to acknowledge privately that despite everything, Hope's vision had contributed something unique to the brand, a realization that complicated her feelings further. blending lingering hurt with reluctant respect, and family dynamics added another layer of complexity as shared gatherings became cautious exercises in diplomacy, with relatives subtly encouraging reconciliation while avoiding direct confrontation, creating moments filled with unspoken emotions that hovered between regret and longing. And during one particularly tense celebration, Steffi found herself reflecting on how rivalry had once energized both women, pushing innovation and passion rather than division, prompting her to question whether competition itself had ever truly been the problem or whether fear and insecurity had simply magnified existing fractures. While Hope, hearing through mutual acquaintances that Forrester Creations struggled to launch a groundbreaking new line, wrestled with conflicting emotions of sympathy and vindication, unsure whether she wanted the company to succeed without her or secretly hoped her absence would be felt, and this internal conflict revealed how deeply intertwined her identity remained with the world she had left behind, proving that emotional separation often lags far behind physical distance. And as fate would have it, industry circumstances soon forced an unavoidable reunion when both women were nominated for the same prestigious fashion award, instantly reigniting media attention and speculation about unresolved tensions, turning the ceremony into more than a celebration of design, but a symbolic confrontation between past betrayal and present transformation. And leading up to the event, interviews reignited old narratives, reporters probing for conflict while fans debated loyalty. Yet both Hope and Steffi surprised observers by refusing to criticize one another publicly, signaling a maturity born from hardship rather than reconciliation fully achieved. And when the night finally arrived, anticipation filled the room as cameras captured every glance and gesture. But instead of hostility, the atmosphere shifted when Steffi approached Hope before the ceremony began, initiating a quiet conversation away from flashing lights, where years of pain condensed into honest acknowledgement, not an apology that erased the past nor forgiveness that ignored consequences, but a recognition that both had grown through suffering, admitting that betrayal had forced them to confront parts of themselves they might otherwise have avoided forever. And the moment carried profound emotional weight because it reflected acceptance rather than resolution, allowing them to stand as equals shaped by shared history rather than adversaries defined by it. And although the award ultimately went to neither woman, the symbolic victory lay in their ability to coexist without bitterness dominating the encounter, sparking renewed optimism among colleagues who believed collaboration might someday become possible again, while afterward each returned to her respective world with a renewed sense of clarity, Hope embracing accountability as part of her identity rather than a shadow she needed to escape, and Steffi recognizing that strength included the courage to release resentment. And as new opportunities unfolded, both women continued evolving, occasionally crossing paths at industry events where conversation became easier and guarded smiles slowly transformed into genuine respect, suggesting that time, humility, and personal growth could succeed where confrontation once failed. And within Forrester Creations, the cultural shift initiated by the crisis matured into a lasting philosophy emphasizing communication and emotional intelligence, ensuring future leaders understood that loyalty must be nurtured rather than assumed, while Hope's independent brand flourished precisely because it embraced transparency, openly acknowledging her past mistakes as part of its narrative, inspiring audiences who saw authenticity as a powerful form of reinvention.